All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the CQQC podcast, now being changed to the NBP or the No Beaters podcast. We're back for season 3, episode 1 of the podcast. My name is Gabe, and I'm joined with my co-hosts Bryan and Nate as always, and we are finally back for what seemed like forever in a long hiatus between season 2 and season 3. We're re-energized, we're ready to go for the rebranding of the podcast. So, boys, how have things been? What have you guys been up to in the last few weeks since we recorded?
So for me, of course, the school year started back up. So I've been focused on my final year at Ryerson in nutrition and food. So it's an exciting time of the year, but also stressful with having to apply for grad applications later on in the semester. And of course, continuing my recipe development with cooking and baking on my Instagram. Shameless plug, an Idiot's World on Instagram. So you can follow me there. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of that.
No plug is a shameless plug there, Nate. It's all opportunity.
What are you, Ron?
Honestly, pretty boring. I work every day. I do my job more or less 9 to 5. 9:30 to 6 to be precise. I've taken a course for some Lean Six Sigma, if people know what that is. Basically, it's just nerd stuff, which is just improve accuracy and control stability. So I just do that, chilling, going for walks with my girlfriend and her dog when I wake up on time, that is. It's not been too crazy. Trying to hit the gym a lot. I'm enjoying the gym. Gym is great. Nice new place that used to be a Good Life, and I'm only paying the price of a foot for less, which is like $5 every 2 weeks. But yeah, nice. Nothing too crazy on my end.
Sweet. Yeah, no, I've finalized my move. I finished at Queens and moved out of Kingston with my girlfriend into her parents' place in close to the Quebec border. So living in Lancaster, close to Alexandria, which is kind of a joke because it kind of reminds me of, or I feel like it could be the city that Letterkenny was shot in. That's how kind of like country it is here. But on the topic of gym, though, I have also been gymming as well as working. It's funny because my gym is it's a newer gym, but it's like on top of like a butcher shop. So whenever I'm sending like a snap or to my friends, I'm like, oh, we're going for a workout, and then after I'll grab some chicken at the butcher shop. It's pretty funny, but
it's great.
So far everything's been great, and looking forward to getting back into Canadian Quidditch finally. We're looking forward to a new season of the podcast. Good to have everyone back. Missed you boys, but we'll get into sort of the rebranding of the podcast. So. It's something we kind of talked about sort of off air, and how we've, as Ontario especially sort of reopens a little bit, we kind of wanted to rebrand the podcast, given that we started the podcast during quarantine, how crazy everything was. And I think as we sort of break out of that, I think it's kind of appropriate that we rebrand the podcast as well. We don't want to be remembered as we don't want to be deemed a quarantine podcast, because we're not, hopefully, fingers crossed, going back to quarantine anytime soon. So the No Beaters podcast. I guess we kind of talked about sort of two talking points as it relates to the name of the No Beaters podcast. I don't know if you guys want to kind of chime in what our sort of thinking was when we were thinking about renaming the podcast.
So since we are a Quidditch themed podcast, we thought it'd be a cool idea to have some sort of common phrase that's used on pitch during games. So, for example, we thought of names like Brooms Up podcast, and of course we settled with the No Beaters podcast. And what kind of confirmed that was the fact that on this podcast, as the three hosts, none of us are beaters. We're all quaffle players, either chasers or keepers. So it was a nice way to kind of have a play on words with that, both like being a Quidditch phrase, so related to Quidditch, and also like us as individuals. In terms of like players of the game not being beaters, and also it's kind of a funny slight or a funny jab towards beaters as well. So
quaffle players only quaffle players. Beaters are welcome, and seekers, I guess, as well. Refs, if Devin, you're permanently retired Corey Smithson, maybe. He's only snitching now, but yeah, qualified players only, plus everyone else, inclusivity. But yeah,
Nice. Yeah. So that's kind of sort of the inspiration of that. And then Nate, do you also want to talk about the sort of the updated like logo design as well? I know because you played a really integral role and sort of we kind of came with the kind of went towards with the final logo design.
So since we are a podcast, to kind of represent that, we used a pair of headphones with like sound waves above to indicate some sort of speech taking place. And instead of like a human head, we used a quaffle, which is of course a game ball used in the sport. So that kind of visually represents the sport as well, to represent a human head. So it's kind of like the quaffles listening to the podcast. So kind of just all culminates together pretty well, both with the name of the podcast and then visually with the quaffle, the headphones, and like we put we kind of carried this over from our last logo with the Canadian flag. We put that like on the sides of the headphones, kind of like how Beats have theirs with their logo. So kind of similar with that idea, so people know it's a Canadian podcast as well. So overall, it's a pretty nice logo, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, so in terms of what we kind of envision for the podcast moving forward, obviously we want to kind of roll with the No Beers podcast and the No Beers branding. As Bryan said, we're not by any means excluding beers and seekers from the podcast. It's just kind of sort of a funny play on words. But yeah, so in terms of direction of the podcast, I think we do want to kind of still emphasize the Canadian Quidditch landscape. So whether that's just in QC, as well as in MLQ, and sort of following along with Team Canada as they kind of go along into Pan Ams and World Cup. We will kind of touch a little bit on some of the international play as well, but for the most part, we want to highlight the Canadian game. Yeah, I think we kind of talked about sort of the direction in terms of some of the topics. So I don't think we necessarily want to focus a ton on like sort of the game film analysis necessarily. Like I know we had done a couple of those videos, but and we do enjoy talking about the game, but I think we kind of want to have more like the sort of behind the scenes of Quidditch in Canada. So getting to know some of the players, getting to know some of the fun stories that you don't necessarily hear about unless you're actually kind of part of the community, or you're actually actively in those games, or sort of behind the scenes for certain teams and sort of that kind of stuff. And we also kind of want it to be a platform of kind of what you guys want to talk about. So like, yes, we have some of our ideas, and but we want this sort of to be a podcast about you guys as well. So the community within QC, and just kind of sort of what you guys want to use our platform for in terms of promoting something within the Quidditch community. So we have our ideas in terms of some of the guests we want to bring on for this season. But like I said, we're completely open book. We'd love to have as many different people from as many different backgrounds within QC as possible. Another sort of idea that was I thought about that was that came up within QuidCon this past year was sort of life after Quidditch. So being able to bring on guests from that were kind of maybe originating in Quidditch Canada and kind of moved on within their careers, and sort of seeing how maybe Quidditch has been able to help them in their sort of career after Quidditch. So I think that'll be another really cool sort of idea. But again, we're open book. Love to have I'd love to have people use the platform to talk about whatever they want within the Quidditch community, and just really kind of promoting the sort of inclusive environment that we know or hope to provide, or sort of hope that Quidditch Canada is able to implement within our community. So is there anything else you guys want to add to what we kind of see for this season in the podcast moving forward?
Hopefully more Western players get the chance to come on to some episodes. It is hard with like the time difference sometimes, getting schedules kind of lined up, but it'll definitely be nice to have more of the Western side of Canada be brought up more and talked about more on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's nice to get a whole bunch of people in and from different backgrounds, cover different topics. I think for me, it's just covering the present. Like we're talking about stuff that's actually going on and not having to reminisce or look way farther on to the future. I think kind of staying grounded in what's going on around us right now and looking at a lot of different aspects of our sport, of what's happened or what's gonna like gone on with someone since they played Quidditch, or what are their plans now to improve something in Quidditch. It's nice to kind of be grounded in what's going on in the present for once.
Yeah, for sure. I think having no Quidditch for as long as we did, and having to like kind of like go over sort of old stories and go over old matches was kind of getting to a lot of us. And I think it is really nice and refreshing to talk about like Quidditch that's happening now, and like sort of being able to just like actually talk about present instead of sort of past events. And so that's something we're really looking forward to for the season. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any sort of topics you'd like to address within the community. And we'd love to have a podcast episode with you regarding your topic. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to us for that. In terms of this episode of the podcast, again, we wanted to kind of make it relatively brief in terms of kind of talking about the rebranding. We also did have some real Quidditch within the Quidditch Canada. It was an unofficial tournament, but nonetheless, we do want to talk about it briefly. Nate had the fortune of being able to attend that tournament. So Nate, do you want to kind of quickly touch on sort of the tournament that was Ravens Rumble? It seemed like it was a pretty successful event.
Yep. So we had 6 teams, a part of the tournament, the classic tournament hosted by the Carleton Ravens. What was special this year is that we had 2 B teams return to the league. So we had Maple Rush from Ottawa return, and then also Carleton Conspiracy for the Ravens club team, second club team. So it's nice to have like those 2 teams kind of featured as like the first Quidditch game in Canada, at least on the eastern side of the country, to like kick off the season in the unofficial tournament. And then besides those 4 teams, so we had also Valhalla and also a combination of McGill and the Flamingos joined together as a team coming out from Quebec. So it's pretty nice to get back into the Quidditch after two plus years off of playing. And of course we had like a lot of the new rules that came into the rule book this year that we implemented with the jump ball instead of the brooms up for the qualifier game, and then the no reset rule, 15 seconds to cross half. So those were also adjustment for a lot of us, even like the experienced veteran players, since there are new rules. And like us ourselves, we also did not play for 2+ years unless we played for the Black Bears or the Ravens. Not the Ravens, Black Bears or the
Raiders.
So it was pretty new to all of us, but pretty fun and successfully run tournament.
Nice. Yeah, we don't have the scores again because it was an unofficial tournament, but so yeah, in the final it was, to kind of quickly sort of summarize, in the final was you guys, so Carleton the Ravens,
and Valhalla destroyed.
Yeah. So I mean, I think again, Valhalla being the experience that they had, and the fact that we were all kind of, especially the university teams not being able to play for so long. I mean, granted, Valhalla wasn't necessarily playing either, but something kind of relying on some of the old chemistry they may have had. They kind of had a little bit of blow in the final, but nonetheless, I think it was a really successful weekend. And a couple talking points we wanted to kind of quickly touch on. I know you mentioned some of them there, but we had the new rules, the new QC rules that we had Kyle kind of talk a little bit about, but kind of want to get both your thoughts on sort of some of the things you saw. I know that the big talking point being the new tackling, and being able to see some of the footage from the weekend. What were your kind of thoughts on sort of the 2-arm tackling and how that kind of maybe changed some of the gameplay that we saw over the course of the weekend?
Yeah, so with the 2-hand tackling, it definitely helps teams defensively. Every player on the pitch, regardless of their size, is able to be effective in terms of stopping a player one-on-one, as long as they can keep up with them or stay in front of them. So it's definitely a way to feel more involved, especially if like a smaller player doesn't. Sometimes you may not feel like you're being too effective on defense if someone's able to blow by you with like 1-arm tackling, but with a 2-arm tackling, definitely decreases that advantage for bigger players, and it also increases that advantage for smaller players. So it's definitely nice to see players who usually aren't able to tackle bigger players due to like the 1-arm restriction, being able to like take down some players or just slow them down at least, and just be effective for teams defensively. And also, with strategies that teams now implement, they can kind of change things depending on how the matchups are on pitch, and kind of just what they have available to them in terms of their roster of size and speed, all that stuff.
Was there a specific rule that maybe you specifically liked, or did you find like something that really stood out? I guess beyond two arm tackling, is I think that's maybe an obvious one. But was there something else that people really seem to enjoy?
I think two-hand tackling is the big one that people enjoy. Some people enjoy the jump ball if they're not so fond of the running. Two people running full speed against each other for the ball. For me personally, as someone who would usually run for the ball and the brooms up, of course I'm not doing the jump ball because I'm one of the smaller players on the team. But some people may find it exciting. I think it's a bit less exciting for me if I was a spectator, just because having like people run for the ball at the middle, kind of you want to see like who's going to get it first and like if there'll be a quick goal off the brooms up. But now with the jump ball, the person jumping for the ball has to tip it to a different team member, and so and everyone else is lined up at the keeper line. So usually it's a pretty slower it's a slower start than you would see in other renditions of Quidditch, due to having to have someone else pick up the ball and then kind of work your way up the pitch. And then like in terms of rules that I guess were least enjoyed or harder to get used to was the no reset rule. So there's a lot of turnovers for the no resets. Besides half being like the major line you can't reset back into your zone from. The keeper zone or the keeper line is also another line you can't make a pass back into. And I know both from my team on the Ravens and then other teams as well. Some people didn't understand the rule at first with like the fact they cannot have the keeper like come out of their zone, make a pass to someone to switch off, and then that new keeper comes into their zone, and then you pass the quaffle back into the keeper's hands in the keeper zone. That counts as a turnover. So it was a bit of an adjustment for a lot of players with that rule. Not understanding how it works and all that stuff.
Did you find that? I guess with that, as like handing the ball off during turnovers and stuff, having the 15-second countdown, do you guys notice like the pace pick up a little bit of like, hey, we can't just la-di-da our way and our transitions actually have to be a little bit speedier by chance?
It's like for like normal quaffle play without any like penalties, I think like 15 seconds may seem short, but really with the size of the pitch and everything, like it doesn't take 15 seconds to get to half if you're even walking up the pitch. But like when it comes to penalty killing, of course you want to be able to kill off as much time as you can, but you are forced to enter within the opponent's half, even though you're killing a penalty. So it definitely is a disadvantage for teams trying to kill off a penalty. But it so that with that, it's a good way to like pick up the pace of the game during those times where the gameplay is usually slowed down due to penalty killing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nice. I think kind of back to one of your points, Nate, there where you said that there was like sort of 2 years of incoming players given COVID and having lost that one season there. But yeah, like how did like I guess there was going to be an adjustment period, but being a more experienced player and having kind of seen what the game looked like before the rule changes, how did you find that you were sort of adjusting personally to the new rule changes? I know you mentioned that the two-arm tackling is sort of great and whatnot, but how did you deal with the other new rule changes and adjust personally?
Yeah. So for me, like one thing to mention about two-hand tackling, I actually forgot that there was two-hand tackling at the start of the first game, and then like my bench was saying like use two hands. Then oh yeah, we can do two-hand tackling now. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's like probably the biggest change that everyone loves.
It's a hard habit to change from like playing any other sport and being like, okay, I'm going to use two arms to tackle you. Oh no, now I have to use one. And now everyone's yelling, no, do it. Two arms, you're allowed to. And you got to break your old habits. Must be so weird.
And like with the other rules, it's worth just adjusting to the game, because now the way that the game is run now, it's basically two games or two halves that take place instead of 18 minutes of quaffle play, and then you have the snitch come on, and then it's basically the game ends when the snitch is caught or goes into overtime, etc., etc. But now you have the the quaffle period, and then you have the snitch period. So the quaffle period being 20 minutes of quaffle play, so going back and forth. And then you have a 5-minute break, I believe, in between the two halves, and then you go into the snitch on pitch or snitch period, and that's usually 5 minutes. So it's a bit different, a bit harder to adjust to, I guess. If you're like used to playing the normal one, like, not the normal way, but the other way of having the snitch come in during the actual game with like no extra period. And then if the snitch is caught, let's say a team is up by 30 and they catch the snitch, which I believe is worth 35 points. I could be wrong, but it's definitely something like that, 35, 45 points. The team that did not catch, they can either choose to continue the game if they feel like they have a good enough chance to catch up, if they have enough time in those 5 minutes, or they can just, I guess, default and end the game there. So that's also a different thing that takes place to kind of adjust to and also strategize with as well, especially during like a tournament.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, like I think overall the rules are going to be, I guess for the veteran players, it's going to be a bit of adjustment. Honestly, if I could decide, I think I'd rather kind of come in as a new player, just because I haven't been able to play Quidditch in a couple years now, so it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, kind of breaking the habit of going from one arm to two arms, back to one arm because of MLQ, and then QC back to one arm. It's just yo-yo. So I think it'll be interesting to see how sort of the season plays out with the new rule changes. But it was great to see sort of in action, and would love to hopefully have Kyle on in the new season here to see how he thinks the new rule changes are going within QC. But any other points you want to throw on there to wrap up the Ravens Rumble chat?
Overall, it's pretty like well organized. All teams definitely had fun. We had a lot of great Quidditch games take place, and a lot of good action as well. Even though like a lot of people were coming out for, I wouldn't say retirement, but 2 years off, like it wasn't as I guess sloppy as you think it would be. Like it was pretty good quality in terms of everyone playing decently well. So yeah, that was nice to see and also experience.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, like I said, great to have actual present Quidditch to talk about in Canada. We're looking forward to divisionals coming up the following weeks to come here within QC as the official games sort of roll into action. So we'll definitely be kind of touching on that in the next couple of weeks as we're along with season 3 of the podcast. So I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. Oh, one other point we want to make too is we will be bringing back the Who Will the Toque segment. We will start that again back up in episode 2 of this season, because in episode 2 we're going to talk about the first round of divisionals, that being central divisionals. So we'll kind of bring it back for that. Again, for those that maybe missed sort of how we're bringing that in, we introduced that in season 2. And it's kind of, again, piggybacking off of our friends at the STP, the Steve Dangle podcast, where they have the Who Wore the Crown segment. They kind of give it to the MVP within the hockey community, particularly the NHL. So we're going to kind of do the same thing, but being a Canadian podcast, we're going to be using a toque, and we're going to award it to someone within the Quidditch Canada community for their efforts, their MVP actions, if you will, within the community. So we'll be bringing that back next episode. And we also want to mention too, we have a special surprise coming in the next episode as well. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully you'll tune in to figure out what that is, but we're really excited to fingers crossed have that show up in episode 2. So again, really excited to be back. We are now the NBP, the No Beers podcast. We'll quickly plug our socials as well. So we're still the CQQC _ podcast on Instagram. So follow us there. And as we sort of update our social medias with our logos and new branding, we will update the handle as well. So follow us there to stay up to date with the new changes to the podcast. And yeah, we're looking forward to a great new season. Rebranding, lots of more exciting Quidditch and present Canadian Quidditch to talk about. So we're looking forward to it. And we'll see everyone next week again, talk about Central Divisionals starting up within QC. So see everyone next week.